Hello, everyone. I'm your narrator from Grave Hush, and I'm here to help you unwind tonight. I know many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it for you right now? Now get cozy, take a deep breath, let your body sink into the stillness. It's time to relax and let the story carry you into sleep. Our first story tonight. Let's begin. My dad ate my mom, and now he's on the run. I was getting home from school the same time I always did, 10 till 4. The school bus groaned behind me as it resumed its route. My arrival was greeted by our immaculate lawn and award-winning garden. Nothing was out of place that day. Just like my family, everything was always so neatly organized and cataloged. My dad was an accountant, my mother a librarian, and I was the athlete. Our home life was the definition of mundane. The unpredictable was accounted for and mitigated by an optimal and efficient lifestyle. Bermuda grass cut exactly to 2 inches in height. Shoes off at the door. House shoes were mandatory. We even had several guest pairs that were regularly disinfected. Dinner by 6 o'clock sharp. Floss and brush after dinner. In bed by 11 p.m. on weekdays and 12 a.m. on the weekends. Brush and mouthwash in the morning and breakfast at 7. Thankfully, my parents allowed me some agency in how my room operated. They accurately assessed that I was simply a hormonal juvenile male, so I was properly allotted a space where I could indulge in customary youthful pastimes. What I'm trying to say is I was allowed to eat Doritos while I played Super Nintendo in my room. Of course, I would have to clean up regularly, though, or no baseball. Sports were also considered an indulgence, but my parents still allowed me to participate. They understood the value that sports played in social development as well as health maintenance. However, any notions of making it a career were severely discouraged. Attending my baseball games was simply a formality. Their presence signified they supported me, even if they had no interest in whether I hit the ball or not. They didn't root or cheer. They waved and then got distracted watching anything other than me. But before you start to feel sorry for me, don't. It didn't bother me. My parents were weird, quiet nerds that had more in common with automatons than Homo sapiens. They cared in their own way, I suppose. At least my mom did, I think. She showed the most potential for being human. Perhaps that was her downfall. I threw open the front door and was assaulted by an array of aromas. There was onion and maybe garlic. Very typical. The canned peas were obvious, and whether you loved them or hated them, they were very distinct. There was also a bit of a smoky or slightly burnt meat smell. Beef, perhaps. Or maybe pork. But underneath it all was a very peculiar odor. It was pungent, but it was hard to identify. The other smells masked it so perfectly I almost thought I imagined it. It was like a phantom. "Shoes off," a voice called from the kitchen. I was surprised to hear my father giving me the command. He wasn't normally home on a Monday until 5:15. "Dad? What are you doing home so early?" "I left early to make dinner," he said, rounding the corner. He looked bizarre. He was always a bit detached, but now it was in an unhinged sort of way. His tie was loosened. One side of his collar stood up like alfalfa, and his usually well-groomed hair now hung down in his face, which was slick with perspiration. He wore a stained apron over his work suit, and his feet were bare. "It's not even 4 yet, Dad." He stood there for a moment, almost like I hadn't said anything at all. Then he sprang to life. "You're absolutely right, but I wanted to do something special for you." "For me? Why?" He turned around, heading back to the kitchen without saying a word. I followed him. He had the table set and ready to go, but it was only set for 2. He just stood there staring at me blankly, almost like he was expecting something. All right, well, I'm gonna work on some homework till Mom gets home, I said, slinging my book bag back over my shoulder. Dinner is ready now. I turned back to look at him. He stared at me with such a serious intensity. I had never seen him like this before, but he was still calm, unnervingly so. He hadn't raised his voice, and there was no hint of anger on his face. Okay, I said coolly as I dropped my bag back to the ground. I took a seat, and after a few seconds, he sat in the chair across from me. Where's Mom? She's late, he said with such venom I couldn't believe my ears. My parents rarely fought, and when they did, it was so tame it was almost boring. The shock left me in silence. I then began to notice the food laid out before me. A big bowl of clumpy instant mashed potatoes crested by a cold, unmelted stick of butter. The peas were overcooked, dried out and shriveled up. But that was nothing compared to the main course. Several serving plates hosted many different varieties of mystery meats. Some of it was burnt, while other bits were very rare, bloody. None of the viscera looked appetizing, and compared to normal cuisine, it looked downright alien. What is this? Freshly butchered meat, grass-fed, none of that ultra-processed junk. He began loading up his plate with all sorts of different pieces of flesh and organs. He didn't seem to be interested in the peas and mashed potatoes. I nearly threw up when I saw him drown his plate in a dark, viscous fluid he called gravy. Dad, seriously, what is going on? He dropped his fork and knife instantly in annoyance. He looked down at his plate and inhaled deeply. Your mother is leaving us. I was stunned. I hadn't seen this coming at all. I wouldn't say my parents were in love, but they were pretty much two sides of the same coin. Their awkward and robotic behaviors functioned in step with one another like they were coded to be together. Really? You guys never fight? So you're getting a divorce then, just like that? He picked his head up. Eyes closed, he rolled his head back and forth, shoulder to shoulder. We're figuring it out at the moment. I want to talk to her. Don't I get a say in any of this? She's gone, Billy. She's never coming back. Silence enveloped us. The kitchen clock ticked loudly and irreverently in the background. Each tick thundered maddeningly as the seconds dragged on for what felt like an eternity. My father grabbed up a handful of what I assumed to be sausages and tore into them like a rabid beast that hadn't eaten in days. They popped and crunched as he chewed loudly, only stopping to spit out a few tiny bones here and there. I struggled to summon the fortitude necessary to keep my lunch from coming back up. Then, suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Knock, knock, knock. The carnivorous creature in front of me froze, juices from the meat running from the corners of his mouth and collecting on his chin. Drip, drop, knock, knock, knock. The banging on the door came again, but louder and with more vigor. He stood straight up with a singular fluid motion, his countenance vacant and his head locked onto the source of the disturbance. He moved purposefully towards his prey as if nothing else existed. I sat quietly as I heard the hinges of the front door squeak and strained my ears to hear who these interlopers might be. I failed, and after a quick exchange of quiet, garbled words, I heard the door close with force. My father returned immediately, and without a word, he continued where he left off. Who was it? He stopped chewing to spit out a bone, and behind gritted teeth he said, Christians. My parents were both staunch atheists and big fans of Richard Dawkins. However, they didn't mind that I went to church with my friends. Boys will be boys, they would say dismissively. Don't get me wrong, I'm not the most pious individual, but atheism, like my parents, just seemed so insipidly boring to me. At least my church youth group would take me to play laser tag. What did they want? What? He asked in agitation. His eyes shot up at me in quick anger. Well, what did they want with us? He ignored me and went right back to stuffing his gullet. He stopped to chug a glass of cold milk, leaving greasy fingerprints all over the glass. He exhaled, thirst satisfactorily quenched. A growing boy needs to eat his meat. Clean your plate or no baseball. Ever. I had reached my limit. This entire interaction had journeyed beyond the pale. Knock, knock, knock. Fists slammed hard against the wooden table, the impact rattling the glassware, and the chair shot out from under my father as he stood back up. "Wait here," he said icily. I heard my father open the door abruptly as he began to raise his voice, but it was cut off as the door slammed behind him. There it was again. That odor. Perhaps the door opening had created a draft which once again revealed that putrid and unmistakable odor. I rose to investigate it. I exited the kitchen and began sniffing profusely, alternating between deep inhales and quick successions of whiffs. I followed my nose down the hall into my parents' room. I stopped outside the closed door and hesitated. My parents never had any rules about not going in their room. Its natural repellent originated from the boring nature of those who inhabited it. I was never compelled to explore it, and therefore the door was always open. Until now. Without my consent, my hand began twisting the doorknob. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. Pounding away. My stomach, which had already been through enough that day, roiled in nervous agony. The door gently retreated back into the room. I was not prepared for the smell that infiltrated my nose and pervaded all throughout my body. The gagging began reflexively. But lo, the final death blow had yet to be delivered, until I beheld the gaze of my dead mother's head. The pallid, waxy head rested upon a silver platter. It was offset by blood-red candles. The eyes had been violently gouged out, leaving score marks around the sockets. Her mouth hung open in a haunting expression, and upon her tongue sat two bloody eyeballs. The thick, chunky fluid shot out of my mouth like a projectile. The carpet attempted to drink the sick, but it had already been engorged by blood. The red drink trailed off and then took shape into some sort of pentagram beneath the disembodied head. I say pentagram, but that is only because that is as close a description as I can come to. It was like a pentagram, but more intricate, interwoven with other smaller symbols and runes. An arm shot out from behind me and slammed the door in front of me. I turned to face my father, our eyes only inches apart. Fresh blood trickled from his mouth. "Mother is resting," he yelled into my face. I ran as fast as I could to my room and slammed the door behind me. Heart still racing, I collapsed against the door, trying to formulate my next move. However, my mind was shattered into a million pieces, and I failed to conjure the strength to rise from the heap I had made myself into. I heard the coat closet slide open. I perked up and listened intently, holding my breath. The sound of bare feet slapping against the hardwood floor grew louder, and then were muffled by the burr of the hallway. "Billy, why don't you come out here and have a chat with Dad, please, son?" he said calmly as ever, right outside my door. I tried to reply, but my voice failed me. Nothing came out. I've never felt so helpless in my life. The closest phenomenon I can relate it to is sleep paralysis. But there was no dream demon, only the demon I had formerly known as Dad. How about a game of catch with your old man? My heart raced painfully in my chest, and my breathing was irregular. I think I may have been having a panic attack. Maybe we can practice with the bat. Smash! The force of the bat against the wooden door reverberated throughout my body. Splinters of wood rained down upon my head. I forced a desperate and hoarse scream from my lungs. "Help!" My voice cracked, and it felt like I shredded my vocal cords, but it was barely audible. The bat hammered away at the door, increasing in speed all the time, until a hand was pulling me by the hair. This is the end. Oh dear God, please, I don't want to die. Just then, sirens echoed faintly in the distance. The hand that was in the process of scalping me went still, then it vanished. I heard the sound of the garage door opening, followed by the screeching of tires peeling out of the driveway. The sirens grew louder and louder until I heard them right outside. Then they stopped. I took a deep breath, got up, and ran to safety. In my mind, I had imagined it was the police. However, it was an ambulance. The police were about 10 minutes behind. It turns out the Christians at the door were a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses. The first time they had knocked, they were doing their usual routine. My father had impassively rejected their attempt at conversation, and they had started to walk away when one of the men was overcome by an inexplicable thirst. However, the nearest vending machine across the street only accepted quarters. The man really wanted an ice-cold Coke, but he only had cash. He turned back to see if my father might break a bill for him. That was a huge mistake. That ended up saving my life. He knocked on the door again, and out came my father, instantly hostile. The man had apologized and quickly tried to explain the situation, hoping to de-escalate things. Well, that went tits up as my father angrily screamed incoherently, then lunged at him. They rolled around on the ground for a few seconds, and the other man tried to intervene. When he attempted to pull my father off his friend, my dad, using his teeth, clamped down on the initial man's nose and tore it off. The other man cried out in shock and ran to get help from a neighbor. They called 911, and the first responders arrived on the scene shortly after. When the police got there, they had thought it was just a simple altercation that went nightmarishly wrong. Until they saw me standing outside the house covered in wood splinters and vomit, hair ripped to hell and looking hysterical. I ended up living with my grandparents after that. I was given a choice to either stay in school with my friends or transfer to a different school where no one knew who I was or what my father did. I ultimately chose my friends. I rather people whisper about me than not have any type of friend group or support. And as horrific as things had been that day, they actually got better. I've lived a fairly happy and healthy life since then. My grandparents are great people, and they've done everything they can for me. But he's still out there. I think about it a lot, especially when things are going really well. The thought will drift back into my mind. Where is he? Does he think of me? Is he even alive? Sometimes I wish he would come and find me. Not for revenge or some sense of justice for my poor mother, but because I want to know why. Why did he do this to us? What was with the ritualistic crap in the bedroom? He's not even religious, or he wasn't. Or maybe it's not really about religion. I don't know. But the burning question of why has led me to chase the white rabbit down through the occult rabbit hole. I've been chasing shadows for a while, but I think I have finally found a cult that can help me. They claim to be Satanists or some type of demon worshippers. I've been assured they can help me to understand the ritual I saw being performed that day. They are actually very intrigued to meet me from the sounds of it. Tonight is my initiation ritual, although it's more like an infiltration. My pursuits are purely academic, I assure you. I just want answers. Wish me luck. Story 1 ends here. Now, let's begin story 2. The taxi man offered me advice about my stepmom, but I don't think he's a man at all. It was like I'd never been away, except for when I had to go home. Strange. King's taxis aren't answering, I said. They went out of business. Here, call one of these, the manager said, holding out a plastic pot full of business cards. I pulled out a worn one and dialed the number. 10 minutes later, I waved my restaurant colleagues goodbye and stepped into the night. A long gray sedan waited on the forecourt, and I climbed into the back, opting to sit behind the passenger seat. The driver didn't bother to confirm my name or my destination, but he was heading in the right direction, so I settled into a tired slouch and looked out of the window at the vague shapes of barns and houses I'd walked past earlier. "Good shift?" asked the driver. Startled, I sat up and addressed the sliver of ear and temple I could see. "Yeah, thanks." "Busy?" "Number, not really." The driver turned onto the narrow lane which climbed up to my village, and I again looked out of the window into inky blackness. "Busy enough for there to be a need for you, though." "Well, yes." Inside the cab was just as dark as what lay outside, but in the rearview mirror I could see a smooth forehead and dark eyes pitted deep in their sockets. They flitted away and back onto the road as I met his gaze. At the next junction, he took a wrong turn. "Sorry, you should have gone left there," I said. "This way is better, I promise," he said, voice vaguely accented. Every time he spoke, it seemed to alight on a different region. German, no. American. Or is it Polish? I kept quiet as he drove to the opposite end of the village, did a full lap of a roundabout, and headed all the way back to where he'd gone wrong, continuing on. I glanced in the rearview mirror to again find him looking at me. His mirthful eyes shifted away. At the bottom of his seat, where the backrest met the cushion, something was moving. I frowned, wondering whether my eyes were tricking me. But in the fleeting light of a street lamp, I saw the ghost-white fingers of a hand wriggling like maggots on a corpse. Stunned, I checked to see where the driver's hands were and saw them both firmly gripping the steering wheel. "Here she is, our sleeping beauty," my stepmom said the next morning as she leaned over my dad to pour him some coffee. He blinked as she stood upright again, giggling, before returning to his newspaper article. No amount of cleavage was going to distract him from a piece about the measures being taken by the automobile industry to reduce their carbon footprint. That was my dad, inert and unmovable, steady as a battleship anchor. "Morning," I said, directing the word at my father. "Morning, love," he grunted between slurps of coffee. "Is it?" asked my stepmom. "Is it what? Is it still morning?" "Yes." "Only just." I ignored her and reached for a cereal bowl. "What are you doing?" she asked. I paused. This was how she operated, and it seemed she hadn't changed her ridiculous habits while I'd been away studying. What she wanted was a trial. My dad would be the judge, I would be the defendant, and she'd be the prosecutor. Anytime she deems that I'm taking liberties, she pecks me into submission and forces me to ask my dad whether I could indeed charge my phone or do my laundry or use some of his toothpaste. Not today, I thought. I reached for the cupboard where the cereal was kept, grabbed a fistful of Kellogg's Frosties and threw them directly at her face. I then put the bowl away, shouldered my handbag, and left for work. The Saturday shift was always busy and long. We work from midday to 9 p.m. in the restaurant before the manager sends us to the function room, where a wedding reception is invariably taking place. In the small hours after we'd finished clearing up, I searched for a different taxi rank to use, but the manager informed me that this new firm had established something of a monopoly while I'd been gone. I could use a different company, but the wait time would be considerably longer. I yawned and looked at my watch. If I called the same cab rank as the night before, what would be the odds of the same driver turning up? Extremely slim, and my bed was calling me. I dialed the number. I swore under my breath when I saw the long gray sedan pull onto the forecourt. Foolishly, I got in. The driver regarded me with eyes that didn't exhibit the same level of shock as his voice did. "It's you. You drove me last night, didn't you?" "Yes." "How nice to see a friend again." "Did you have a good shift?" "I did. It was busier." "Ah. There's no better occupation for a troubled mind than busyness." "Who says I have a troubled mind?" "Everyone has their troubles," said the driver. I sighed, thinking of my stepmom. All of my troubles seemed to be coming from her at the moment. "What does she do to bother you so?" asked the driver as he turned onto the narrow lane. I felt his eyes boring into me through the rearview mirror and realized that I'd spoken my thoughts aloud. She's jealous of me. Wants my dad's attention but can't fathom that he can love us both. Nope. In her tiny little mind, there just has to be a winner and a loser. So she makes my life a misery in order to compete in a competition she can never win. What kind of father, if it really came down to it, would choose anyone else over his children? The driver was pondering this as he took the same wrong turn as the night before. "You should have gone left," I said. "Ah, my apologies. I can be such a silly Billy sometimes. I was thinking about your predicament, and it occurred to me that your stepmother may benefit from a fright. Have you considered this?" The driver swung his head around to look me straight in the eyes as the car hurtled towards the roundabout. "If you shout loud enough, she might listen." As he spoke, his neutral, ageless face began to change. His ears sank into his skull and became mouths. His eyes and nose did the same. All the while, the car remained on a collision course with the roundabout. "Look out!" I screamed. With his eyeless face still peering back at me, he handled the car as well as any experienced driver might, and did a full lap of the roundabout. Then another, and another. He accelerated, laughing while the centrifugal force pressed me against the car door. A huge tongue slapped out over the bottom lip of his mouth, his original mouth, and his enlarged uvula pulsated deep within his throat. Without warning, he screeched off the roundabout and turned back around in his seat. I wiped tears of terror away to find him sitting upright and with a head that looked perfectly normal. "Well, you have my advice," the driver said, and dropped me off. I didn't sleep well that night, but I must have drifted off at some point because I woke to a gentle knock at my bedroom door. Groggy and disorientated, I peeked through a gap to see my father standing awkwardly outside. "Morning, love," he said. "Morning. Is this about yesterday? The Frosties?" He nodded. "You know it was wrong." "I know. I'm sorry, it's just her. She drives me mad." My dad pursed his lips and said nothing. His eyes were sad. "I'll apologize," I said and closed the door. I found her sitting primly on the sofa, her back straight as a plank. A pair of red glasses perched on the tip of her nose as she knitted what looked to be either a frog or a crocodile. "Hey, I'm sorry about yesterday. It was uncalled for," I said. My stepmom sniffed. "If you were sorry, you wouldn't have done it in the first place," she said. A slug of molten iron twisted in my belly and my heart began to pound. I wanted to grab her throat and scream in her face, to take back my apology and tell her what I really thought of her. But then I remembered the taxi driver's advice had been to do just that, and he didn't seem like a good person to listen to. I turned and took a stiff step away. Then another. It turned out that screaming Sundays were still a thing. Sundays were the most popular day of the week for families to go for a meal out, and families meant children. Little bundles of chaos that sit like royalty in their high chairs, shrieking and bawling and shouting and crying. I was on edge, understandably, I think, and so whenever a child cried out, I found myself wincing. Several colleagues asked if I was okay. They said I looked paler than usual. I told them I hadn't slept well, which was true. I didn't tell them about anything else that had happened the previous night. To get home, I opted to use the other taxi rank, even if it meant waiting longer, so I hopped up onto a bar stool and ordered a Coke with my 20% colleague discount. "Hey, your phone," the bartender said. I looked over and saw that I had 2 missed calls. A red minivan flashed its headlights at the front of the restaurant. The driver must have pressed a button as he saw me approach because the side door slid open automatically. He was a kindly Sikh man with an elaborate mustache who took the time to confirm my name and destination before gently pulling out onto the main road. I breathed a sigh of relief. The distance between us was too great for small talk, which I was glad about. We turned onto the narrow lane and began to climb, albeit slowly. The minivan juddered as the driver shifted gears before making smooth progress again. However, not everything stopped shaking. Something wriggled at the bottom of the driver's seat where the backrest met the cushion. The darkness was too thick to see anything, and the next streetlight was a quarter-mile down the lane. I heard a small scrabbling noise, and in the next fleeting moment of illumination saw a pale white hand scuttle down the neck of the driver's shirt. The fingers of the hand clutched the back of the driver's throat before becoming gelatinous and flattening out across his skin. "Something's on you," I whimpered. Said the driver as he reached to scratch his neck. The hand thing detached a piece of itself onto the back of his hand and set about consuming him. He yelped and jolted the wheel to one side, then the other, and I screamed. There was a wet, choking sound as the driver's body became something amorphous and hardly human. It turned to look at me with its head of open mouths. Unseeing hands drove us down towards the roundabout. "Did you shout? Did you frighten her?" "No." "Why not?" asked a mouth where an ear should be. "Why not?" asked a mouth where a nose should be. "Why not?" asked all of the other mouths one at a time as the driver spun the minivan around the roundabout at such an outrageous speed that the van threatened to lift onto its two outer wheels. "My dad loves her." "You haven't been a faithful friend. You didn't take my advice." "We're not friends. Let me out." The driver shrieked and thrashed, pounding the steering wheel with fleshy hands. But the van appeared to be slowing. "Let me out! Let me out! Let me out!" I begged, and the driver's feet twisted madly out of the footwell to kick against the windscreen. I took my opportunity and slid open the door, bailing out onto hard tarmac, numb to the gravel which had embedded itself in the heels of my palms. Bolting down an alley, I left the minivan to drive in circles with one of its doors lolling open. I sprinted all the way home, getting stung by nettles and pricked by brambles in my efforts to avoid roads at all costs. The first opportunity I gave myself to rest came when I'd locked my front door behind me. I slid down to the floor, panting. I looked at my bloodied hands and torn clothes, and then up at my stepmom who was standing in the hallway horrified. "I'm not even going to ask," she said before turning to climb the stairs. Every time I even think about a cab, I feel sick. Yet I can't conceivably, as a lone woman, walk 3 miles in the dark to get home after work, so what should I do? Story 2 ends here now. We drift into story 3. I'm a night shift janitor. I keep finding a white bedsheet in one of the bathrooms I clean. When my mom told her friends that I worked as a night janitor at a blood bank, I think they believed I'd been sworn to keep the holiest of holy secrets of blood. I don't know how else to explain their excitement. It was big news for the Catholic Book Club. I think I spoiled it for them, however, when I proceeded to tell them that I never saw blood at work. It was my job to empty garbage cans and vacuum after all. I wasn't a phlebotomist. That I had no special expertise in cleaning blood was particularly confounding to them. They had a look on their faces like children who've been told all at once that Santa isn't real but that death is. One of Mom's friends looked at me like I was foreclosing on her house when she said, "But it's a blood bank. There must be blood everywhere." Translation: Does Santa die too? Not that I get to see. Translation: Everybody dies. Everybody. Pretty soon after that, I did get to see blood at the blood bank for the first time, though it was my own blood, and I never had any intention of donating it in the way that I did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I have to tell you about the sheet. I was in the blood bank's bathroom Windexing the mirrors when I first saw it. I bent down to pick up a rag to wipe with from my carry caddy on the floor, then stood back up and saw through the mirror's reflection that there was something behind me. A single white bed sheet. I turned around to look with my own eyes, only to find that when I did, the bed sheet wasn't there. I faced the mirror again. I looked in the Windex streaks like they held the premonitory secrets of tea leaves, or at least some sort of explanation. What I thought I'd seen was gone, so I saw something that wasn't really there. You're probably thinking, what's the big deal? When you've seen something that may be in fact not real, it isn't a phenomenon you just chalk up to a ganky sandwich. Life is not a Charles Dickens yarn about moralizing ghosts. I was seeing things, or at least a single illusory thing. And that concerned me. Could I see a doctor about it? Technically, yes, but I was a little hamstrung by a super high copay on my health insurance, commensurate with my position as a guy who spent a lot of time cleaning toilets. I thought of telling my mother, but she'd find Jesus in there somewhere. My mother found Jesus in everything. Like if there was a version of Where's Waldo. For the Son of God, my mom would be the Where's Jesus world champion. So what did I do? I did what anyone else without the resources for discreet psychiatric counseling would do. I ignored it. I used my willful ignorance to pay the rent on a temporary peace, to the tune of a month and change. But like anything bought with ignorance, that peace proved to be impermanent. I did stop worrying about it for a time, but only for a time. A month or so went by. I was in the bathroom Windexing the mirrors again when I saw it. It was right there in the mirror's reflection, the white bed sheet, just hanging there like it was strung up on an invisible clothesline. I shut my eyes tight and said something to the effect of, "It's not real. Please go away. It's not real." But when I opened my eyes, it was still there. I turned around to look without the mirror's mediation, hoping I would see nothing at all again. But I saw a white bed sheet hanging, with nothing for it to hang on, in the middle of the air. I had an incredible urge to touch the bed sheet. From time to time, touch can see those things your eyes can't see. Maybe the sheet was attached to ultrafine fishing line, or those strings they used to make actors fly in movies back before CGI. I wanted to find out. I needed to touch it and find out. I know that you might read that and think, no, that's the last thing anyone should do ever. The safest thing to do, many of you will say, and in accordance with everything I know about cursed objects from every spooky movie ever, would be to flee far and fast before the object could rub its bad juju off on me. You never touch the unexplainable thing. But this was real life. I was not in a movie. My job was to clean and to a lesser degree organize the blood bank at night, and I couldn't imagine that didn't include any and all rogue bed linens. So I touched the sheet. I swear it made a sound, like it was purring. Then it floated up toward the air vent over the last toilet stall, and slithered through the grill, then off to parts unknown. I thought about it night and day for the next 2 weeks. Did the white sheet mean something? Was it a prank? Was it a magic trick? Was it a symbol of solidarity with phlebotomists? And if so, what kind of political movement was that? I racked my brain and put whatever I came up with into Google. Do they hang sheets in blood banks? White sheet bathroom prank. Bathroom hallucinations. The quality of the answers I found on the internet was equivalent to how awful my need for them was. Truly, very awful answers. But I narrowed it down to 3 weak possibilities. 1. A vagrant who used the bathroom after hours had hung up his bed sheet to dry while I wasn't looking, and the AC blower hiccuped and sucked it into the HVAC. 2. I was experiencing the slow and agonizing onset of schizophrenia, a theory that somewhat tracked since I was a man in my mid-20s. Or 3, I drank an astonishing amount of NyQuil and then forgotten about it. I'd lay awake in bed, tossing and turning and weighing impossible explanations in my head. I was convinced there was some deeper meaning that I had yet to grasp. Maybe it was a sign. Maybe telling my mother wasn't the craziest idea. Maybe hearing her savior-centric speculations wouldn't hurt me. I'd already scraped the bottom of the barrel by visiting WebMD. I started to feel an alternating thrill and dread before I went into work. Some nights I cleaned the bathroom first, which only meant I'd be distracted till work ended, and inevitably run to go check if the bedsheet had materialized. Other nights I tried, and sometimes even succeeded, to hold off on cleaning the bathroom until right before my shift ended. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. My health was suffering because of a probably unreal bedsheet. And then it came back again, as it was bound to do. I had my headphones in while I was vacuuming the reception area. I turned to whip the vacuum cord out of my way, and there it was. I froze. It was slack, as if carelessly draped over an invisible couch. It was bunched and twisted now too, but it still levitated like it had done the other 2 times I'd seen it. The bedsheet turned and floated away from reception and into the back office. Its shape changed as it wove between desks, cabinets, and water coolers. And as it wove, I followed its course. It reached the secure door past, which was the cold room full of fridges and freezers where plasma, cryoprecipitate, and red blood cells were stored. What happened next was a moment that was, I believe, unique to human experience. Something whose witness must be memorialized. The bedsheet billowed and tumbled in the air, its fabric moving in and around itself. It started to form an object. When the bedsheet was done transforming, there hung in the air, right in front of my eyes, a 100's thread count heart the size of a garbage can. A bed linen myocardium contracted the heart's white walls, pumping blood that wasn't there. A heart needs blood. There'd never been a more winning round of charades played anywhere in the world. "I can't," I said, as if I would even consider giving a bedsheet access to the blood bank that employed me. "I don't have the key. They don't give us the key." The white heart beat its folds of bed linens faster, stressing the urgency of its need. "I can't do it. I'm sorry. I don't have a key. I have no way of getting in except with a key, and I don't have one." The heart opened itself as it cracked like a bullwhip, and I startled back on my heels. It flattened into a lowly bedsheet once again. It became so rigid and rigidified with such speed that it was like a rattlesnake getting ready to strike. The goddamn bedsheet was angry at me. Heaven help me, I pleaded with it. "I can't let you in. I'm sorry, but I don't have a key and there's no other way to get in there. I'm sorry." I made it clear to the bedsheet that there was no way for me to get it what it wanted. It attacked. It rolled itself into a tight bunched spiral like a braided white rope. It wrapped around my neck. It dragged me away from the security door. I fought it, but it had strength that came from outside the physical world. I was easily overmatched. I felt the blood in my face trying to push out of my skin, my panicked pulse bumping in my ear like I had a stethoscope over my own jackhammering heart. It squeezed its white body tighter around my throat. The edges of my vision started to fade to black as the bedsheet whipped me onto my back and dragged me away. It pulled me into the office supply closet. Why was it pulling me in there? There was nothing in there except for legal pads, pens, reams of printer paper, Chinese, and the paper cutter. Oh my God, the paper cutter. When I realized what it was doing, I grabbed onto anything I could. I gripped the bottom of a rack of shelves bolted into the floor. But the bedsheet pulled me until one by one my fingers uncurled. It ripped me loose. I wedged my feet behind a defunct Xerox machine, but it was so powerful that it just hauled me forward until my sneaker came off. The worst part was the moment before what happened. My eyes saw the paper cutter, but my mind saw a guillotine. The edge of the blade gleamed under the supply closet's fluorescent lights. "Stop! Let me go! I'll get you blood!" I said, screaming. "Just give me a chance! I'll get you blood!" For a split second, it completely loosened from around my neck. I felt the exhilaration of escape, a rush of relief. I thought it had set me free, but then it wrapped both ends of its roped body around the wrists of each of my hands. I screamed and screamed, but no one could hear me. When it pulled my right hand toward the paper clamp, I dropped into dead weight, turning every ounce of my body's 163 pounds into an anchor. But the bedsheet lifted me up by my wrists like a parent bulldozing through their toddler's tantrum. It whipped me around so that my back was bent over the paper cutter's table. All of a sudden, I couldn't see the blade. There was something about being put on my back, about having to stare up at the fluorescent lights while I was being attacked. That was a violation greater than the sum of the night's preceding violence. My panic gave me new strength with which to fight. But when I tried to twist my hands away, to lever my body weight, to buck and kick my feet in the air, to build up momentum to throw myself, I was restrained by something that felt like steel manacles bolted into a stone wall. The bedsheet unfurled and twisted itself into a four-limbed starfish while it still kept hold of my wrists. It pushed my supinated hand under the paper clamp and with one of its new limbs turned the clamp spindle tighter and tighter. The pain that sent into my fingers was like dunking them inside boiling water. My hand was as pressurized as heavy-duty tires. My blood tried escaping the constriction of my flesh around it. "Help! Somebody, please help me!" "Slice!" I screamed. The bedsheet let go of me. I rolled on my side and around the table, my hand still clamped into the paper cutter. I stood up and reached for the spindle to let my hand loose, but the bedsheet still had one of its snaky limbs keeping the clamp tight. I watched the bedsheet brush itself against the open wounds of my 3 fingers' partial amputations. My blood seeped into its fabric and started to spread. Once the sheet was soaked red, it let go of my hand. I dropped to the ground, barely conscious. I watched from the floor as the now blood-soaked bedsheet transformed again. It changed into something shaped like a human face, without the details of eyes or ears or a fully formed nose, without a body, but it had a mouth. I watched as the bedsheet screamed. If it was screaming in either triumph or anguish, I don't know which it was, and then I passed out. I quit the night janitor job the next day. I offered no explanation to my boss, and she didn't ask for one. I think she could tell over the phone that something was wrong with me. You probably want to know about my hand. What happened when 3 of your fingertips were chopped off is a question that probably answers itself. I am missing the index, middle, and ring finger of my right hand at the knuckles right below where my nails used to be. Of course, my mother asked me what happened. I told her I closed my fingers in a steel door. Does she believe me? Not if rubbing her rosary beads and playing Where's Jesus with a new end times fervor is anything to go by. I'm sleeping in a sleeping bag now. I still felt the need to know the cause of what happened. Even if I was mutilated in the process, I experienced something unexplainable. I still had a burning desire to understand either the bedsheet or whatever force occupied the bedsheet, whatever that thing was. But I couldn't go back there. Not ever again. So I posted a description of what happened to me to an occult and supernatural phenomena message board and asked if anyone knew what entity I'd encountered. The user account that sent me the private message explaining what I'd experienced was deleted as soon as I received their message. Deleted user number X said they'd included in their message to me something from a German occult reference book called Das Nachtnabel-Kompendium, Ungewöhnlicher Phantasmen, or the Nachtnabel-Kompendium of Uncommon Phantasms. Below the book's title was the following excerpt. The Blutgeist is the result of a misbegotten rite of the Black Mass. The theory proposed by the very originator of this volume, the Nachtnabel hypothesis, puts forth that any human being chosen for ritual sacrifice at a Black Mass, and who is descendant from a biological parent dead by exsanguination, and then dies by exsanguination themselves, will return as a Blutgeist through the medium of the last physical object the decedent touched while still living. The Blutgeist, simply put, is the unwittingly summoned victim of a black mass's ritual human sacrifice into the form of a ghost. Such a spirit forever seeks physical reconstitution for itself and appertaining ancestor by subsuming the blood of others into its form. The subsumption is not parasitic, as its cause is spiritual need, not physiological hunger. The Blutgeist seeks life's blood not as sustenance, but as a means of payment on the toll road to its own resurrection into the physical world. The compendium will take special note that since the Blutgeist is an apparition, not an undead hemovore, none of the appurtenances of vampire hunting shall avail against it. Story 3 ends here. Now, listen closely to Story 4. After my smoke break, time had stopped, but something was still walking around. It was an ordinary Wednesday morning, midwinter, still well before Christmas, but the office was already deep in its usual off-season lull. Since our company's busy period was in spring or early summer, by now only Christmas songs were playing and our days mostly consisted of goofing off. Then came 11:25, my usual pre-lunch bathroom and smoke break. I smoked quickly, it was cold outside and no one wanted to stand around too long. I was the only one who ducked into the restroom while the others headed back to their desks to watch stupid videos. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. It was just another simple Wednesday, until I stepped out of the restroom. The co-workers I'd just been smoking with were still standing in the hallway. Dressed in winter coats and hats, one of them was halfway through opening the door. Frozen mid-motion, as if time itself had paused. They were just standing there, all of them, frozen stiff. At first I thought they were joking. Maybe they'd seen some meme and were trying to prank me, but as I walked closer, it all started to feel weirder. 4 of them were standing in the doorway, completely still. None of them even twitched. Nothing. "What the hell are you guys doing?" I asked with a half laugh. But no one answered. They just stood there, completely still. "Guys? What are you doing?" Still nothing. I reached out and grabbed one of my co-workers by the shoulder, gave him a shake. It felt like I was trying to move a mannequin. That's when I started to freak out a little. What the hell was wrong with them? Had something happened? Were they sick? No matter who I spoke to in the hallway, no one reacted. Their faces were frozen, staring blankly ahead, like prisoners of the moment. Panicked, I hurried into the main office. I had to tell someone. Something was wrong with the others. But as soon as I pushed open the door to the large open workspace, I froze again. No one moved, no one spoke, not a sound. It felt like I was trapped inside a model room. No one in the office moved. Everyone was frozen. They stayed in whatever position they were in when time stopped. The monitors were still on, everything kept working as normal. Only my co-workers looked like mannequins. I rushed into my boss's office, hoping maybe he was different, but no. Same deal. He sat there, bored expression on his face, leaning on his desk. Not a single muscle moved. He was completely frozen too. That's when I really started to panic. Only one logical choice remained. Get out of here, as fast as possible. I bolted toward the elevator, nearly knocking over one of the co-workers frozen at the entrance. I jabbed the call button over and over. Nothing. It was like the button didn't even exist. There was power. The screen was lit out, but the elevator didn't move. All right, plan B, the stairs. I ran to the stairwell, but the door wouldn't open. I yanked on it like a lunatic, and nothing. Locked? Or was it broken just like the elevator? What the hell is wrong with this place? And why am I the only one still moving? Next idea, the window. Even if I couldn't climb out, we were on the 7th floor, at least I could try to signal someone, or something. I hurried between the rows of desks. My co-workers were still just sitting there. Cornidum. motionless. Not a single part of them moved. Their frozen eyes stared blankly into nothing. The window wouldn't open either. I pulled and twisted the handle, but it didn't budge. It felt like someone had sealed it shut. I stood there, clutching my head in frustration. The office had never been this quiet, this calm, and that only made it more disturbing. I was terrified, and I didn't understand a single thing about what was happening. Outside, the snow had started to fall. I slumped down into my chair at my desk, hopelessly. I tried all the company phones and nothing but silence. Even my own mobile showed no signal at all. What the hell happened? I just went out for a smoke and a quick bathroom break, and now it seems like time itself has stopped. And me. Why didn't I freeze like the others? And more importantly, how the hell am I going to get out of here? That's when I heard a loud thud from the far back of the office, somewhere behind me. I jumped up instantly, both excited and terrified. Was someone else here after all? Or maybe the others were starting to wake up. But no, there was no one there. Everything and everyone was still exactly where I left them. Some sitting at their desks, others frozen mid-action by the printer. Outside, the snow was still falling, and since the clock had slipped to 4 p.m., darkness was slowly beginning to creep in. I should be heading home soon, but I highly doubt I'm going anywhere today. I just hope help is on the way. Surely someone will notice when an entire floor of people doesn't show up. That's when I noticed, still standing next to my desk, that one workstation was empty. But the monitor was still on. If I remember right, that's where Sandra sits. A kind, middle-aged woman. She always brings muffins at Christmas. We had coffee together just this morning. And now, she was gone. Could that thud have been her? Cautiously, I hurried over to her desk. It was just a few rows down. No sign of Sandra. Her chair was knocked over and her cat-themed coffee mug lay on the floor. The last bit of her drink spilled out across the tiles. "Sandra?" I called out loudly, hoping she was still nearby. "Where are you, Sandra?" But no reply came. Just the same graveyard silence as before. The hum of the machines was the only sound, and until the fluorescent lights suddenly began to flicker. And then it happened. The thing I'd feared most. All the lights went out. Outside, it was nearly pitch black. Massive snowflakes drifted down slowly, almost majestically. Inside, the office was plunged into near darkness. The overhead lights were dead, but the monitors still glowed, casting a grotesque cold light across the quiet room. My co-workers' frozen bodies looked even more disturbing now, faintly illuminated in that ghostly glow. It would have been better if they were at least working, or talking, or if I could hear them breathing. But there was nothing. Then I heard it. The door to the supply closet at the back of the office creaked open. Every part of me wanted to run. But where? I crept back to my desk. Of course, I immediately banged my shin on the corner of a table and knocked over a small trash bin in the dark. But at least there, I felt a little more comfortable. It was my desk, my spot. I stared at the supply closet door. There was only darkness beyond it. No movement, no sound since it had opened. Maybe it just stayed ajar. Maybe a draft pushed it open, but the windows didn't open either. So what did? And then I saw it, the horror. I just stood there frozen like the others around me, but I was still conscious, still very much awake. In the corridor between the desks, a strange figure was shuffling toward me. It looked like a dried-out corpse. Its skin was pure white, clinging tightly to its bones. Its face was sunken, eye sockets dark and hollow. It had no mouth at all, but its bony arms were so long they reached the floor, ending in huge, knobby fingers. From its hunched chest, smaller skeletal hands dangled forward, reaching, twitching. and these tiny hands moved as if they were playing invisible piano keys in the air or searching for something unseen. I couldn't move a muscle. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I didn't even try to hide. I just stood there in my stupid shirt, staring as the monitor's glow lit up the grotesque figure, inching ever closer to my desk. It was almost upon me when, with a sudden instinct, I ducked down and crawled under the desk. I don't know what drove me. I don't know why I thought it was a good hiding spot, but at the time it felt like the only one I had. My co-workers' frozen bodies still sat in place at their desks. It was all absurd, at least as much as I could make out in the dim light. Then, in the blink of an eye, the creature was right there. Standing at my desk, I saw its massive, bony feet. The nails were like knives. Its body was tall and gaunt, so skeletal it seemed to stretch all the way to the ceiling. I crouched under my desk, holding my breath. Damn cables dangled around my neck, and between my bag and the chair, I barely had space to fit. But the creature didn't notice me. It just stood there, waiting. Maybe for me, maybe for something else. Then it moved. Its enormous hand rested on the head of the man who sat behind me, Pete. Pete was the guy in the desk right behind mine, a brown-nosing little machine, and no one really liked him, but even so, I didn't want to see what that thing was about to do to him. I trembled as I waited to see what would happen. The monster simply squeezed Pete's frozen head, then tipped him out of his chair. Pete lay on the floor calmly, staring at me. I didn't make a sound. The creature reached down, feeling for Pete's body. With its long skeletal fingers, it grabbed hold of his face and dragged him away. It turned and headed back the way it had come, shuffling slowly just as before, pulling Pete's paralyzed body behind it. Only one thought flashed through my mind. I have to get out of here. I sat trembling beneath my desk, listening as the grotesque creature shuffled across the office carpet. What the hell was I supposed to do now? There was no way out. None of the exits would open. From under my desk, I could see clearly in the nighttime gloom. Outside, snow was falling in heavy sheets. Had time stopped out there too? Or was life continuing as usual? Cautiously, I crept out from under the desk, just enough to look around. The creature was now shuffling near the opposite end of the office, far from the supply closet. Pete was no longer being dragged behind it. I had no idea where he'd been left or what had become of him. The thing just wandered slowly, and the tiny skeletal hands hanging from its chest were twitching, pawing at the air, as if searching for something. I couldn't stay in the same room with it. It was only a matter of time before it found me. I had one chance left. Sneak into the lobby again. Try the elevator or the stairwell door one more time. The creature was still at the far end of the office. I crawled slowly on all fours, inching my way toward the door. I made it surprisingly far, right to where my smoking buddies had been frozen. One of them still held the office door open, so I slipped through easily. The lobby was dark too. The elevator wasn't even lit. I rushed to it and jabbed the buttons. Nothing. None of them worked. Then I turned toward the stairwell door, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw it. The creature was there, standing in the doorway, at the office entrance, looking out. It was staring at me with those sunken, empty eyes. It knew I was there. It wasn't shuffling anymore. It ran, straight at me. I yanked the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. This is where I'm going to die, but then, as the creature's thundering footsteps shook the floor of the lobby, I saw it. The light was on in the restroom. With one desperate leap, I sprinted over, jumped inside, and slammed the door shut behind me. I darted into one of the stalls and locked it tight. The monster smashed through the restroom's main door. I was gasping for breath, crouching in the stall, trying to stay as silent as I could, but the thing knew exactly where I was. It started pounding on the stall door. Its massive hands slammed against the metal, making the entire room tremble. The door bent inward. It looked like it could burst open at any second. There was nothing else I could do. I screamed from pure fear. And then, a familiar voice spoke. Matt, are you okay in there?" At first, I didn't even notice. The creature's pounding had stopped. The stall door no longer shook. There was silence, calm, familiar, just like the restroom always used to be. And then someone spoke again from just outside the stall where I was hiding. "Matt, is that you in there? What the hell are you doing?" I was terrified. My shirt was soaked with sweat. I was shaking like a leaf. With trembling hands, I opened the stall door. It creaked slowly outward. And standing there was a familiar face. Dave, my friend, the guy I always went out for a smoke with. The same guy who just a moment ago had been frozen in place by the hallway door. Now he was standing there, staring at me with suspicion, holding a coffee mug. I was crouched on the toilet seat, drenched in sweat, pale as a corpse, and shaking uncontrollably. Slowly, without saying a word, I climbed down. I stumbled out of the stall, staggering toward the door. Dave didn't say anything. He just looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I staggered back into the office. Everyone was back in place. Some were working, others just chilling. The clock said 4:30, half an hour left until the end of the day. Dizzy and disoriented, I started looking for the ones the creature had taken. The chair behind my desk was empty. Pete's stuff was gone. No picture of his dog. No stupid motivational calendar. Dave and a few others stood behind me, staring, confused. What the hell is wrong with me? Suddenly, I spun around like a madman and whispered, "Where's Pete?" No one answered. They just looked at each other, puzzled, as if they didn't even know who I meant. "Dave," I said, stepping closer. "Dave, where's Sandra? Muffin Sandra. You know who I mean." Dave just shook his head. "Matt, there's no one named Sandra who works here." I looked around, panic rising in my chest. What the hell is going on? And then one single thought filled my mind. I need to get the fuck out of this place. Story 4 ends here, and now we enter the fog of Story 5. I've been a cab driver for over a decade. There are rules when driving passengers at night. There's a reason we're scared of the dark. That familiar discomfort when you're driving alone at night, even if you don't see anyone on the road around you. It's instinct, a warning built into your bones because there are things out there. Beings we can't explain. They don't show up on camera. They don't care about your pepper spray. But they follow rules, ancient ones. Rituals, maybe. I don't know where they come from or who made them, but I've learned this much. If you follow the rules, they'll leave you alone. I just never thought I'd experience something like that behind the wheel of a damn cab. People think being a rideshare driver is simple, and they're right, for the most part. You drive, you talk if they want to talk, you drop them off, you get paid. No real boss breathing down your neck, no office politics, no deadlines, just the road, your car, and a playlist long enough to keep you entertained between rides. That's why I started doing it in the first place. After I left my old job, I didn't want to deal with people anymore. Not really. I'd been a mechanic for 20 years, ran my own shop until my knees gave out and my business went to shit. The rideshare apps came at the right time. I didn't have to smile if I didn't want to. I didn't have to fix anybody's problems, just get them where they were going. During the day, it's easy. College kids heading to class, nurses pulling doubles, grocery store runs for people without cars. Honest, quiet work. Sometimes I'd even enjoy the small talk. I liked hearing about their lives, felt like I was doing something good, even if it was just 5 stars and a quiet thanks. But at night, things change. The air gets heavy, the people get strange. I remember when I first heard about the rules of the road after sundown. Not guidelines, not suggestions, rules. They show up on the app the second the sun begins to set. And if you break one, well, let's just say you don't want to find out what happens. I'm sure this is very confusing to hear for the first time, so let me explain. Every night shift starts the same. Right after sunset, the app buzzes and emits a strange sound. Not a standard chirp a notification makes, something dull and stringy like a warning siren before a storm. On a much smaller scale, of course. The screen goes black just before a message appears in blocky text. Night shift protocol, active between sunset and sunrise. 1. Do not look at passengers directly. Use the rearview mirror if you must. 2. Do not accept payment greater than the cab fare. Never take gifts. 3. Only process one ride at a time. Never allow multiple passengers in your car. 4. Make sure your final passenger is dropped off before sunrise. I review them every time, even though I've got them memorized. I don't know if the app updates them or if something darker is watching to make sure I read them. Either way, I never skip that screen. At least I don't anymore. I made the mistake of ignoring the rules once, and that was one time too many. I never really was a superstitious man. Back when I started doing nights, I laughed. Rules like these felt like a joke, some edgy tech campaign or something, the kind of stuff that gets passed around on Halloween to show they're being hip and festive. But the thing is, these rules, they're the real deal. The consequences are even more real. I learned that the hard way. It started with something small, just a guy who insisted on paying double. He said he appreciated my service, said I looked tired and he wanted to bless me. He pulled out a crisp 100 and set it gently on the center console. I told him no. He insisted. I told him again. He smiled and slipped it into the cup holder. It's yours either way, man. I didn't touch it, just left it there until he was gone. I mean, what's the harm? The guy looked unremarkable after all. A middle-aged gentleman with slicked-back salt and pepper hair, reading glasses, t-shirt, and a vest gave me easygoing surfer vibes. Then I looked up in the mirror. He was still there. I heard him leave, heard the door shut behind him, and saw him disappear into the dark. But he was there, grinning. His eyes were all black. He mouthed something, but the words didn't match the movement, like a broken puppet trying to whisper a prayer. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I reached back, heart pounding. The seat was empty. He was nowhere to be found. Except for the mirror. He stayed there for the rest of the drive, just smiling, chatting away. I parked my cab in the farthest corner of my apartment's lot, locked the doors, and went inside. That $100 bill stayed exactly where it was, untouched, humming with some quiet, invisible pressure. I could feel its presence everywhere I went. Something was trying to make me go back for it. Spend it, maybe. I wasn't sure, but I needed help to make it go away. I contacted support through the app. There's no helpline, no human name, just a form with one question. Describe your incident. I typed everything. The passenger, the tip, the mirror. I waited. I felt so silly. 24 hours later, I got a reply. Protocol breach acknowledged. Remedial steps required before shift may resume. Burn the foreign currency. Avoid seafood for 2 full days. Thanks for contacting technical support. That was it. No apology, no explanation, just instructions. I picked up the $100 bill like it was a loaded firearm and was surprised by the weight of it. I went out to the alley behind my complex and set it on fire in a soup can. The flames hissed green for a moment, then evaporated. It didn't smell like money, burning. It smelled like salt and old fish. I skipped sushi that week. Thankfully, I am not much of a fish guy. By the 3rd night, the app let me log in again. And like nothing ever happened, the rides returned. It has been pretty smooth sailing ever since. Not every shift is terrifying. Some are just weird. Like the woman in the bright yellow dress who got in without saying a word and only whispered her destination. The bog. Or the man who didn't blink, stared straight ahead and screamed every time we passed a fire hydrant. The weirdest ride I ever gave was from last November. It was around 3:12 a.m., that dead stretch of time where the world feels empty. I was parked near the outskirts of town, engine idling, watching a moth dive repeatedly into the windshield. A ping came through. There was no address, just coordinates. I almost declined. Nobody lives way out there. It's all farmland and old sheds. But I was behind on rent, and I was pretty good at following the rules at this point. The profile picture was blank. Name just said M. Fine. I accepted. As I approached the pickup spot, my headlights hit something standing in the middle of the road. A man. Number A figure. Very still. Dressed in old-fashioned clothes, black hat, long coat, hands folded in front of him like he was at a funeral. I stopped. He didn't move. I glanced at the app. The pin was directly on him. Against my better judgment, I rolled down the window a few inches. Hey, UM? The figure nodded once. I unlocked the doors and pulled up the rules panel on the app in my phone. Same rules as always. No change. I read over the first one for good measure. Do not look at passengers directly. Use the rearview mirror if you must. Right. He opened the back door and slid in. Didn't speak. Just sat there, the seat creaking under his weight. I pulled away from the shoulder and merged back onto the main road. The silence was suffocating. I snuck a glance into the rearview mirror. At first, I saw nothing. Then the mirror fogged up, as if someone had breathed on it from the inside. I wiped away the condensation with my thumb and nearly jumped in my seat at what was revealed beneath. The figure in the back seat wasn't looking at me. It was holding something. A large postcard pressed flat against its face like a mask. Long fingers curled around the edges, fingers with nails so long and yellow they looked rotted. Just the sight of them sent a cold wave down my spine. I leaned forward just slightly, enough to make out the writing. 2 words, scrawled across the card in what looked like red ink. Or blood. I couldn't tell. Just drive, it said. I didn't ask questions. I drove. For 40 minutes, we cruised past silent fields, dead gas stations, and stretches of road I swear I'd never seen on any map. I didn't get a destination update, no timer. Just me, the road, and whatever was sitting behind me. The silence felt thicker than usual. The only sound was the low hum of the engine and the occasional creak of the frame, like the car itself felt uneasy. I kept checking the rear view, but the mirror kept fogging up. Over and over, I wiped it clean with the side of my hand, each time revealing the same thing. He was closer. At first, he was sitting upright, stiff, almost mannequin-like. Next time, he was leaning slightly forward. Then his knees were nearly touching the back of my seat. His hat was old and stained, the brim tipped just low enough to hide most of his face. Torn in one corner. Frayed like it had been dragged through gravel. I couldn't see his eyes, but I could feel them, like heat on the back of my neck. A cold sweat was forming along my forehead. I didn't know what to do. No name, no timer, no destination. That had never happened before. I gripped the wheel tighter and kept driving, heart pounding louder than the tires on the asphalt. What do I do if he doesn't leave? What if he just sits there until the sun comes up? Something bad would happen. I didn't know what exactly, but I knew the rules. This wasn't just another creepy fare. At exactly 4 a.m., he tapped the window twice. I pulled over. Before I could say a word, the door creaked open and slammed shut. I checked the mirror. Fog gone, seat empty, except for something left behind. There was a small envelope with one of those fancy wax seals. Inside was a bundle of tattered cash wrapped in a classy red bow. Not a cent over the fare. Thank God. I set it aside and sat there for a while, just breathing. The car was finally quiet. Still, that night feels like it happened ages ago. I'm more seasoned now. Passengers without destinations? Common occurrence these days. Took me a while to realize they're not chasing a place. They're chasing a feeling, a reaction. They're insatiable like that. But I've learned a lot since then. I know better than to feed their desires. You give them the cold shoulder long enough and eventually they leave. These days, I'm more composed, like a prison warden ferrying rowdy inmates. I even bought a pistol. It sits in the glove compartment, mostly idle. But if someone in the back gets bold, starts creeping too close, a little flash of the barrel is usually enough. They growl, they curse, slam the door behind them. Cab fare left on the seat, not a cent overpaid. I don't bother being gentle. It's not like they can tip me. But tonight I am feeling a bit more anxious than usual. It isn't because of the job. Nope, supernatural cab passengers are a walk in the park compared to what I have in store tomorrow. My son's getting married. I haven't been part of his life, not really. That was my fault. I kept my distance after the divorce, told myself he'd be better off without me, hovering around. No awkward visits, no clumsy father-son talks, just space. But when the invitation came, I cried. I just sat on the couch, clutching that envelope, and cried like I hadn't in years. There was no way I was missing it. I've missed too much already. I should be resting right now, getting ready for the big day. But I needed to calm my nerves. For some odd reason, this job does it for me. Midnight hits. The app dings. First ride of the night. I take a deep breath and swipe to accept. Gotta focus. Just get through the shift, then it's straight to the hotel, change into the suit, and head to the ceremony. The guy who gets in looks normal. Collared shirt, dark jeans, clean cut. He slides into the back seat without a word at first. I start driving. A few blocks in, he speaks up. Big night? I nod. Yeah, my son's getting married tomorrow. Oh, that's great. What's his name? I hesitate. James. He repeats it real slow. James, strong name. What time's the wedding? 2, I say, eyes fixed on the road. He grins. That's wonderful. You must be proud. I give a tight smile but don't answer. Something about the way he's asking all this makes me uneasy. It's not the questions. People make small talk all the time. It's the way he leans in when he speaks, like he already knows the answers. Like he's confirming something. We pull up to his drop-off. He thanks me, steps out, and just stands there on the curb, staring through the rear window. I look straight ahead and pretend not to notice. After a few seconds, he disappears into the dark. I sit there in silence, hands still on the wheel. That was strange, even stranger than usual. Then it hits me. The rules. I forgot to check the rules tonight. I pulled up the app and swiped to the rules section. Crap. There's a new rule. Don't talk to the passengers about your personal life. I stare at the screen like maybe I'm reading it wrong. Like maybe it's always been there and I just never noticed. But I know better. That rule wasn't there yesterday. My heart starts pounding. I pull over, open the app, and send a message to support. Something simple. There's a new rule. I broke it. How bad is this? What should I do? No reply. Silence ensued. Last time I broke the rules, it took 24 hours to respond. And I don't have 24 hours. Eventually, I pull back onto the road. I figure I'll do a couple more drop-offs, keep things simple. Maybe if I don't mess up again, everything will smooth over. The next few passengers seem normal enough. Quiet, but there's this weird vibe, a kind of smugness. A few of them chuckle under their breath. One guy keeps stealing glances at me in the rear view like I'm the punchline to some inside joke. Another girl won't stop smiling, just this too wide grin like she knows some deep, dark secret about me. It starts to wear on me. By the third ride like that, my stomach's turning. And then it gets worse. My next pickup is a woman standing alone on the corner in full wedding attire. A long white dress, veil, bouquet. It looks new, clean. Not like a Halloween thing. This looks real. Expensive. She doesn't speak when she gets in, just hums softly. Then she starts singing. Here Comes the Bride. Over and over, whispered off-key, like she's only half remembering the melody. The hair on my arm stands up. I drive in silence. Try not to react. She keeps singing all the way to her destination. And just before she opens the door, she leans forward and whispers, "So, when's the wedding?" I say nothing. She tilts her head like a confused bird. Then she gets out and drifts off into the dark, dragging the bottom of the dress behind her. I'm breathing hard now. Knuckles white on the wheel. Next ride. A guy in a wrinkled button-up shirt, tie hanging loose. He climbs in already shouting. He was a goddamn mechanic, and you know what? He was useless. Sat on his ass for 20 years and expects me to be grateful. I keep driving. He doesn't stop. My fiancée wants me to invite him, can you believe that? To my own wedding? She doesn't know the guy. Hell, I don't even know the guy. He starts banging his fist on the seat in rhythm, like he's working himself up to something. I glance in the rear view. Big mistake. His eyes are wide, wild, red around the edges. There's something shiny in his lap. For a second, I think it's a phone. It's not. Without warning, he raises a pistol, sticks it under his chin, and pulls the trigger. A deafening pop. The windshield doesn't shatter, but I hear the spray hit the back window. He slumps sideways. The door opens on its own, like someone was helping him out. I hear his body land on the sidewalk with a thump, and the door slams shut behind him. I don't stop. I don't check. I just keep driving. Like I said, I'm a seasoned driver now. Sad to say, this isn't the first time one of these loons popped themselves in the back seat to try and get me to turn around. I have bigger issues to worry about. The rule break hung heavy in my head, and I still haven't heard back from support. The next passenger looked relatively normal, clean-cut, mid-20s, button-down shirt tucked into dark jeans. He smiled as he climbed into the back seat. Polite nod, no words. The last few rides had been unsettling to say the least, but this guy felt different. Not better, just different. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Something in his silence felt smug, like he already knew me. Like we'd done this before. We drove for 15 minutes without a word. Then I pulled up to the hotel. He didn't move. I shifted into park and turned slightly, still not looking directly at him, just using the mirror. "This is the address. You're good to go." He stared at me. No change in expression, no acknowledgement. And then I heard it. A knock on the driver's side window. "Dad?" I nearly jumped out of my skin. I turned, and there he was, James, my son. In his dress shirt and slacks, standing outside the hotel, looking confused and a little nervous. The same hotel he and the groomsmen were staying at tonight. How could I forget? I forced a smile. "Oh, hey, son. Just dropping someone off. You nervous for tomorrow?" He squinted at me like something was off. "Yeah, can we talk?" My stomach tightened. I had to get this guy out of the car. "Sure, just let me finish this ride. I'll come inside after, okay?" His eyes drifted past me to the back seat. "Troy," he said. I froze. The figure in the back seat leaned forward, resting his elbows casually on the front headrest. His smile widened. "Hey, man, can you believe this? I ran into your pops and figured we'd do a quick beer run before the big day. Hop in." My blood went cold. No, 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 that isn't Troy, I thought to myself, but I couldn't tell James that. I don't know what would happen if I did. This was bad, really bad. No, James said, shaking his head in disbelief. Troy, you were just inside. You were with the guys. How did you get out here so fast? The figure didn't break character. He laughed like it was a shared joke between friends. James looked between us, clearly unnerved. Dad, who is that? I didn't wait for the thing in the back to answer. This couldn't go on any longer. I slammed the car into drive and tore out of the parking lot, tires screeching, engine roaring. In the mirror, James was yelling something, running after us. I couldn't hear him. You're gonna miss the wedding, the thing said, voice perfectly calm. That's not very fatherly of you. Shut up, I snapped. You're not getting in my head. Oh, come on, it cooed. Don't be like that. Your son talks about you all the time. To me, to everyone. I kept my eyes on the road, jaw clenched so tight I could feel it in my temples. Although he doesn't say good things, you're not a good father, Ben. Shut up, I hissed. Tears bubbling in the corner of my eyes. You missed birthdays, missed milestones. What are you even doing now? Trying to show up at the last second and pretend it means something? I gripped the wheel harder. I wanted to slam the brakes, throw open the door, and drag this thing out by whatever skin it had stolen. Oh, don't be like that, Ben. I have something that'll cheer you up, it whispered. Just keep driving, all the way until the sun comes up. I have something to show you. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. My phone buzzed on the seat beside me. James. Again. I didn't answer. The only sound in the car was the hum of the tires and that thing breathing behind me. Waiting. I wasn't sure what to do now. The passenger gave me a drop-off and refused to get out. That hasn't really happened before. There's no way for me to force it out either. Not without looking directly at it. If I couldn't get this guy to leave before the sun came up, I was screwed. It was useless. I pull over hard, tires kicking up dust on the shoulder of the road. The thing in the back doesn't flinch, just smiles like it's been waiting for this moment all night. I open the glove box and take out my Glock 45. Oh, it says. That didn't take long. You already getting tired of me, Ben? I don't answer. I close my eyes and take a few deep breaths. Oh, Ben. You don't have to do this. You're going to miss out on all the fun I have in store. I don't even turn around. I raise the gun behind me, steady my breathing, and pull the trigger. The shot is deafening in the confined space. I don't look. I just sit there, ears ringing, heart thudding. I wait for movement, for another voice. But there's nothing. I finally peek into the rearview mirror once again. It's slumped over in the seat. Still smiling but quiet now, unmoving. I knew that wasn't going to kill this thing, but it still felt good. I just needed to shut it up for a minute. If it wasn't going to leave, so be it. I had to come to terms with that fact. I wasn't going to make it to the wedding. I was going to abandon my son again, this time for good. The least I could do was say sorry. Tell him I loved him. I just wish I could have done it sooner. Damn it, I wish I had more time. I pull out my phone, hands shaking. I try to call James back, but it goes straight to voicemail. I speak through the lump in my throat. Hey, it's Dad. I wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I should have been there for you. I should have been better. The thing in the back seat was sitting upright now, dusting off its blood-soaked shirt and slicking back the loose hair where the bullet exited. I started to sob into the phone. But I'm proud of you, James. I really am. Despite all my mistakes, you've done everything right, and I'm really, really happy I get to be at your wedding. The mimic was coughing now, pounding its chest with a closed fist. I heard a loud metallic clang as the bullet bounced off one of its teeth on the way out of its throat. I stifle a sob and take a deep breath before continuing. I love you so much, James. I'll see you soon, buddy. I hang up, tears running down my face, fogging up the screen. I sat there in silence for a few minutes. I watched as an orange glow began to rise from the horizon. It was almost sunrise. I closed my eyes and gripped the steering wheel in grim anticipation. This was it. I wasn't sure what happened if I broke this rule, but I knew there was no coming back from it. Tech support wouldn't be able to help me out of this one. Then I hear clapping. Software slow. I look up. In the rear view, I see the thing clapping and wearing a wide smile. Only this time it doesn't look as smug. It appears sincere. Genuine. Nice job, Ben, it says. Really touching. It drops a handful of bills into the seat beside it and steps out of the vehicle. It ducks its head inside to give one final farewell. Congrats on your son's wedding. Then it was gone, just before the sunrise. I'm not sure why it decided to leave. All the night passengers want something, a reaction, a release. Most of the time it is something mean-spirited. They crave anger, heartbreak, desperation. Maybe this one was benevolent. Maybe it needed to experience something heartfelt, something real. God knows I needed it too. I'm just glad it's all over. I didn't take any more rides for the rest of the night. I went home, scrubbed the blood off the back seat even though there wasn't any, changed the air freshener even though it still smelled new, took a long hot shower, put on the suit I hadn't worn in years. When I looked in the mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. I didn't look any different, but I felt different. I wasn't ashamed of the man that looked back at me. I was going to be a new person. I knew it was too late to be a good dad. I've been away too long to fix that. But he would always be my son, and he needed to know that I was never going to abandon him again. I got in the car, not for work, just to drive to the wedding. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something that almost scared me more than a lifetime of ferrying supernatural passengers. Story 5 ends here now. Settle in for Story 6. The campsite I found in the woods was perfect. Too perfect. I'm writing this from a motel because I had to leave my tent behind. I need to write this down. I need to get it out of my head and into the world because I feel like I'm going crazy and because I need to warn people. I'm an experienced hiker. I'm not one of those weekend warriors who sticks to the paved, well-marked trails. I like the deep woods, the places where you can walk for a whole day and not see another soul. I had a long weekend, so I decided to tackle a remote trail in a state forest a few hours from my home. My plan was simple. Hike in about 5 or 6 miles, find a good spot, camp for the night, and hike out the next day. Standard stuff. The hike in was beautiful. The air was crisp. The sky was a brilliant cloudless blue, and the late autumn sun cast long golden shafts of light through the canopy. The only sounds were the crunch of my boots on the fallen leaves, the chatter of a distant sparrows, and the wind whispering through the trees. This is why I do it. This feeling of absolute peace, of being completely disconnected from the noise of the world. After a few hours of steady hiking, I started looking for a place to make camp. I was looking for the usual, a relatively flat spot not too close to the trail, preferably with access to a water source. And then, I found it. It wasn't just a good spot, it was a perfect spot, unnaturally perfect. I stepped off the main trail, pushing through a thicket of ferns, and found myself in a clearing I can only describe as idyllic. It was a perfect circle, maybe 40 feet in diameter. The ground was covered in a carpet of short, soft, vibrant green grass that looked more like a meticulously manicured lawn than a patch of wild forest floor. And the trees formed a perfect, unbroken ring around the clearing, Tall, ancient oaks and pines stood shoulder to shoulder, their branches interlocking overhead like some kind of a dome, leaving this single, perfect circle of green open to the sky. It was like something out of a fairy tale. A small, rational part of my brain registered how strange it was. Clearings in dense forests are rarely so symmetrical. The grass shouldn't be so uniform, so soft. But the overwhelming feeling was one of discovery, of incredible luck. It felt safe, protected. The circle of trees felt like a natural fence, a private room gifted to me by the forest itself. I dismissed my unease as my city dweller's cynicism. I had found the jackpot of campsites. I dropped my pack with a contented sigh and set to work. The tent went up easily, the stakes sinking into the soft earth with a satisfying thump. I gathered some fallen branches from just outside the clearing and built a small, neat fire pit in the center. Soon a cheerful little fire was crackling away, warding off the evening chill. I cooked a simple meal of dehydrated chili and sat on my log, watching the flames dance as the sun set, painting the sky above the circle of trees in hues of orange and purple. This, I thought to myself, is perfect. This is what it's all about. As true darkness fell, the forest changed, as it always does. The familiar woods of the day became a strange place of shadows and unseen movements. But I was snug in my little circle of light and warmth. I felt completely secure. After cleaning up my cook set, I doused the fire thoroughly, making sure every last ember was out, and crawled into my tent. I zipped up the flap, settled into my sleeping bag, and tried to sleep. And that's when the perfection started to unravel. It began with a feeling, a strange sensation from the ground beneath me. It was a faint, almost imperceptible movement directly under my sleeping bag. It felt like insects. A whole lot of them moving around just under the tent floor. A low-grade, creepy, crawly feeling. I tried to ignore it. I'm in the woods, after all. There are bugs. I pulled my sleeping bag tighter around me and closed my eyes, focusing on the gentle sounds of the night. But I couldn't sleep. The feeling persisted, a constant, subtle, wriggling sensation against my back. It wasn't painful. It was just wrong. Then the noises started. They came from outside the tent, from the ring of trees surrounding the clearing. A soft snap of a twig, the dry rustle of leaves. At first I assumed it was just an animal, a deer, maybe a raccoon. But the sounds were too regular. Snap, rustle, snap. They seemed to be moving slowly around the perimeter of the clearing, like someone is moving around me in the darkness. My heart started to beat a little faster. I lay there perfectly still, my ears straining in the darkness. And then I saw the shadows. My tent is made of a thin, light-colored nylon. The moon was bright, and it cast eerie, dancing shadows of the tree branches onto the tent walls. I watched them, trying to calm my racing mind. It's just the wind, I told myself. The wind is making the branches move. But there was no wind. The air was dead still. Yet the shadows on my tent walls were moving. Not just swaying, but actively, deliberately shifting. They were long, thin, finger-like shadows, and they were stroking the outside of my tent. I could see them sliding up the walls, tracing the seams like curious, probing fingers. I sat bolt upright, my breath caught in my throat. I grabbed my powerful flashlight from the mesh pocket beside me. My hand was shaking. I flicked it on, pointing the bright white beam at the tent wall. The shadow vanished in the glare. I swept the beam around the inside of the tent. Nothing, just me, my gear, and my hammering heart. I turned the light off. The shadow fingers returned, caressing the thin fabric. I was terrified now. The feeling from the ground had intensified. It wasn't just a vague wriggling anymore. It was faster, more deliberate. It felt like 1,000 tiny, needles tapping against the floor of the tent from underneath. I fumbled for the flashlight again, my hands slick with sweat, and pointed the beam down at the tent floor beside my sleeping bag. And I saw it. The grass had come through. Dozens of thin blade-like shoots of the soft green grass had pierced the thick nylon floor of my tent. They were sticking up, maybe half an inch, like a patch of freshly sprouted lawn. But that wasn't the worst part. They were moving. They were swaying back and forth in perfect, horrifying unison. Swish, 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 a tiny, hypnotic, rhythmic motion. They weren't just blades of grass, they were something else. Cilia, teeth, feelers. They were testing the air inside my tent. They were trying to find me. I screamed, then scrambled for the zipper of the tent door, my fingers feeling like useless, clumsy sausages. The sound of the zipper was obscenely loud in the silence. I burst out of the tent and stumbled to my feet in the center of the clearing, whipping the beam of my flashlight around wildly. The clearing was empty. The circle of trees stood silent and still. For a moment, a sliver of hope, of denial, cut through my panic. Maybe I was hallucinating. Maybe I had finally lost it. Then I turned the flashlight back on my tent, and the world fell out from under me. The tree branches weren't coming from the trees, they were coming from the ground. Dozens of thick, dark, root-like tendrils, the color of wet earth, had erupted from the soft green grass of the clearing. They were wrapped around my tent, constricting it, squeezing it like a giant boa constrictor. The sleek dome of my tent was misshapen, buckled inwards under the pressure. The roots were fibrous and sinewy, and I could swear I saw them pulsing with a slow, rhythmic beat, like a network of dark veins. They were pulling the tent downwards into the soft earth, which seemed to be yielding, sinking. It looked like my tent was being eaten, digested, and in that moment of absolute soul-shattering horror, I understood. I didn't think. I didn't grab my pack. I didn't try to save my expensive gear, my phone, my wallet. They were all in the tent. A tent that was currently being swallowed by the ground. The only thing I had was the flashlight in my hand and the clothes on my back. I ran. I ran for the gap in the trees that led back to the trail, my feet pounding on the soft, living earth. I felt a strange, sucking sensation with every step, as if the ground itself was trying to hold me back. I crashed through the ferns and onto the hard-packed dirt of the trail, and I didn't stop. The run through the forest was a blur of pure animal panic. The beam of my flashlight bounced and jittered, illuminating a chaotic, terrifying slideshow of dark tree trunks, twisted roots, and gaping black shadows. Every rustle of leaves was the creature, its tendrils slithering after me. Every shadow was its gaping maw. I ran until my lungs felt like they were on fire, until my legs were jelly, until I was sobbing and gasping for air. After what felt like an eternity, I saw it, a glint of reflected light through the trees. My car. The sight of that familiar man-made object was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. I burst out of the woods and into the small gravel parking area, fumbling in my pocket for the spare key I always keep there. My hands were shaking so violently it took me 3 tries to get it into the lock. I threw myself into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and locked it. I sat there for a moment, my chest heaving, listening to the sound of my own ragged breathing. I jammed the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. A beautiful, beautiful sound of civilization and escape. I didn't look back. I drove all night, the adrenaline coursing through my veins, not stopping until the sun was up and I was hundreds of miles away. I'm safe now, I guess. I'm in a cheap motel room, but I'm not okay. I close my eyes and I see it, the wiggling grass, the pulsing dark roots, the way my tent buckled and sank into the earth. I think the clearing wasn't a clearing. It was a thing, a living thing. The soft grass wasn't grass, it was a lure, the soft lining of a mouth. The perfect circle of trees wasn't a protective fence. It was the rim of the jaw. And I had willingly, happily, set up my camp on its tongue.